We have learned so far how to create, read, update, and delete nodes. But why would we do that programmatically when we could just modify our nodes in the HTML document directly? And that's a great question. And the reason we actually learned all of this so far is so we can get into the events in the DOM. So what is an event? Event is an idea of when something happens. So let's say when you click, that's a user event. That's an event. Click is an event that a user clicked on something. Let's say if you're scrolling, that's an event. Let's say if you start a video, if you stop a video, if you use the wheel of your mouse. Let's say if you make your screen full screen. Let's say you minimize or you shrink your screen or resize your screen or your window. That's an event. So whenever certain user activity happens or something changes, it doesn't have to be a user activity. Let's say if the internet goes online, or the internet goes offline, that's also an event. Something is happening. So when something happens, we as programmers can actually capitalize on that particular event and then do something. And that's what gives us developers the power to make these modern applications combined with all this knowledge that we have learned so far. Now, so far you may be thinking this is simple. If you think it's simple, that's awesome, because this is the foundation and you will build awesome applications. We'll show you examples based on this foundation. So let's start with events over here. So in our cheat sheet, I have the list of events mentioned over here. There's a URL. If you go on the Mozilla documentation, there are a list of events that are available in the browser and they're categorized, all right? So these are certain events when certain things load. Let's say if your document loads or unloads. So remember I talked to you about if the browser has gained internet access, there's an online event or the offline event. Let's say if there's a field of text field, let's say if you actually click in it, then the focus event triggers. Let's say if you unfocus it, that's called blur. So the blur event is going to trigger. Let's say if you are resetting a form or you're submitting a form, these are events that trigger. Let's scroll down. Let's say if you go full screen, or if you resize, or if you scroll your document, these events are triggered based on which we can do something, right? Let's say if you want to reorder your page, let's say if you want to connect with the database when the internet is available, if you want to save things in the local storage, let's say if the internet is offline, all of these things can be controlled by us because we have access to these events. So with that knowledge, what we need to know is only these two methods. That's simply node.addEventListener. So what this does is you're telling the DOM that if whatever event happens to this particular node, then run this callback function. Remember, we talked about callback functions from our set timeout example. That's just a function you're going to provide that's going to run only when a particular event fires on that particular node. If you want to remove that listener, you would actually say node.remove event listener, provide the name of the event, and then provide the callback function you want to remove. So let's take a look at how we would do that. So I'm going to go back to our code, and we're going to go with our most simplest example, which is the click button, all right? So let's say I'm going to go to my document over here, and over here I'm going to create a button. Back to our simple example, click me please, all right? And just for the sake of speed, I will just call the ID of this, and I'll call it click or CLK, right? Like such, or I can just call it CLK is fine. All right, save. So this is a button. I refresh and it shows up over here. So now what I want to do is when I click over here, let's say I want to do something. All right. So how can I can capture this event? And that is via the node.addEventListener. So I'm going to say I'm going to first capture the node. And how do we do that? We say document.get query selector, and I will provide the ID. So now CLK is the ID, and I've captured that button. Now I'm going to say button btn dot, oops, what is happening here? Btn dot add event listener. And then what is the name of the event? I want it to be click, and click is an event. So if we go to our documentation or reference over here in Mozilla, if I do Control F and look for click, it should be over here. If you click or double click or the wheel moves or mouse enter or mouse over, these are all different events. You can just read the description what they do, all right? And you can play around with it as well. I cannot go over everything with you, right? That's why we have these documentations and references. I will give you the foundation, and with practice, you will know piece by piece almost everything, right? Not everything, but almost everything, okay? So click. So going back to our code. So when the click event triggers on the button node, then run this function. So I'm going to provide a function. And what does this function do? It's going to say, I was clicked. That's all it's going to do. All right. Save. Now refresh. Now, if I click, you see I was clicked happened.